Step number 8 is successors. Successors are, a successor of one will be a natural predecessor of something else. So, when we go in and we typed in, design has a predecessor of notice to proceed, you see that notice to proceed automatically identified, um, design as being a successor of that. So you're going to see after you go through and put in all the predecessors, as we'll go over and look at the other schedule, that it'll fill in most all other activities. However, there will be activities that do not have successors clearly identified. So we need to go through and clean that up. A good example is right here. This task, this submittal review, does not have a natural successor. So we need to identify, okay, what is the natural successor to, this built-up roof submittal? Well, if we can look down here and we can say, okay, well, we know it's the roofing, right? Because we need the submittal done before the roofing. We don't have uh, any fabrication associated with no long lead items. So we go down here and we say, okay, where is the roofing itself? Well, roof insulation. Okay, so 62 would be the successor of that one, and we can go up there, or 60 actually, and it shows you right here the predecessor is 66, so we probably should use that one. So we want to make sure that the predecessor of 66 has a successor of, so if we want to go BUR submittal review, right? And we hit OK, and now we've cleaned up that logic here. Now the missing successor has a missing successor on activity has a successor now. So we want to go through every task, cleaning up all the successors. Because if we don't have everything linked, if not every activity has a predecessor and a successor, we have a open network, which basically means that the software will allow that activity to push out as you update it, with not showing the corresponding effect on the last activity. Remember I was talking about float before? So if not everything is tied together, if everything doesn't have a predecessor and successors, we can't come down to the very last activity and look at our float numbers, or we can't look at our float numbers because they're meaningless. So that's the open logic. So every activity needs to have a predecessor and a successor. So, that's the last thing that we want to do, is we want to go through and, okay, well, the last activity obviously don't have a successor. That's okay. We know that that's not going to have a successor, but we're going to go through every activity, making sure there's a predecessor and a successor exist. If it doesn't, we have to fill that in. Once we've completed that, we have closed the network, and at that time the float numbers and all that information makes sense. So kind of to revisit what I just said, every activity has to have a predecessor and a successor except for the first and the last. The first activity should not have a predecessor. The last activity should not have a successor. If it does, you have an open network. If you have an open network, your total float is junk. That number does not mean anything. So only through a closed network can you get that accurate information. So that pretty much sums up successors. There are going to be some instances where you don't have natural relationships for successors. As I've said for the predecessors, if you don't have something that naturally occurs, by the sequence of construction right after, we're going to have to force something. We're going to have to force a relationship. We're going to have to create a relationship that's unnatural. However, be careful when you do that, because that can affect um, how your schedule is updated down the line. So that covers successors. Step number 8.